Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another video. So today's video, I wanted to kind of go over what I found to be a kind of a neat way to approach a brand new blend. And also this kind of method works when you're in a bind. Let's say if you made a perfume and you've got like 50 materials in the perfume and something doesn't smell right and you don't know where it's coming from. How do I, where do I find this smell? This kind of method not only kind of fights that from the get-go, but it also helps to backtrack and find things where things went wrong. So I kind of stumbled across doing this method just more recently, and I find that it helps me blend quicker and easier. Because I know when it comes to making a perfume blend, and if you're not using a pre-made formula that you found somewhere and you're trying to make a brand new creation, a lot of it is just simply trial and error. Test batch after test batch after test batch and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And you'll find that 20, 30, 40, even 50 trial batches later, you're still reworking the formula, trying to perfect it, trying to just essentially perfect it. So what I kind of did was I was working on a perfume, and the more I tried to tweak it, the more I just found that it was losing its path. It was kind of losing its focus and goal that I intended it for. So I took a step back and I thought to myself, well, let's tackle this perfume in pieces and chunks. So this is actually a good method if you're doing a brand new perfume from scratch right there from the start, or this also works if you want to backtrack a fully formulated perfume and figure out where things went wrong. So the best way to describe this method that I kind of like to use now is working in chunks in sections of the perfume, breaking it down into 3 parts, obviously the top, middle, and base, which is pretty common. Most people actually build a perfume. They work either on the base first, then they work on the mids, and then the top, and so forth. But I'm taking it a step further where not only am I taking it by sections, I'm taking it by what I call, the heavy groups and the accent groups. So what I mean by what's a heavy group? A heavy group to me is the main basis of the theme of the perfume. So when your intention of this perfume is, let's say for example, I want to make a women's springtime fruity floral. The main notes I want to portray are going to be, we'll say lily of the valley, iris, lilac, and honey, musky dry down with sandalwood, and a bright citrus top. So right then, those are the main heavy hitting groups. That's when somebody smells the perfume, those are the main notes that are going to come across to them and be identifiable. But then you also have these minor accent groups, which is not necessarily smelt unless somebody told you it was there. And these are your smaller groups, like if you want to add hints of greenness, like green or grassy or leafy, or slight subtle hints of fruitiness if you're adding subtle accents of fruits, subtle accents of just little minor things that you're doing to dress the perfume up to make it interesting. So without rambling too much, I'll just show you an example without actually making a perfume, but I'll show you an example of how I like to go about this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is what's your perfume's concept theme. You want to identify the main heavy hitting notes first, and then also keep in mind what are some of the accent subtle things that you may want to dress it up with. But then you also want to consider what is the perfume style. Is it primarily a summer citrus, freshy? Is it a gourmand? It is a chypre? Is it a floriental? Is it gourmand? All these things. Is it a woody? So you want to keep that in the back of your mind as well. So The first thing that I like to do is, obviously, with this method, you won't even need a scale. Because right now you're in the testing, trial and error phase in trying to marry cohesively the main heavy hitting, notes that you want to portray in this perfume. So you won't need a scale just yet. You will later down the road. But for now, it's almost like taking the Jean Carl's method and taking the materials that are the most important to you in this perfume and marrying those notes first in sections, but also by groups and subgroups. So usually what I do is I'll grab an empty beaker, and because in this you'll be working in such small amounts. This is what I mean by, for now, you're just going to use drops just to find out rough estimates, rough ratios of which materials play nice together at what amounts. And what I like to do is, because I'm using such a small amount, literally all I'm going to do is fill just a corner of this little beaker up. So what I kind of made was I just took a tissue paper and rolled it up and bunched it up and taped it down, so when I lay this on it, it's angled. So anything that I drop in here runs down to the corner, so I can easily access it, and I'll explain why. So the first thing that I like to do is I'll work on the base notes. And for me, I ask myself, okay, in this perfume, this style, this theme, this concept and notion that I have in my head, the base notes to me is anything that is roughly 300 to 350 hours on a paper strip or longer. These are the longest lasting, substantial, long lasting materials. So I'm going to work on those first, marry those, and get those kind of unified smelling first before I move forward. So in the case of this perfume as an example, I know I wanted it when I say the dry down, the base notes, I mean when you spray your perfume and it's like maybe 4 or 5 hours into the perfume and you're left with nothing but a skin scent and you're really digging in there, what do you want that skin scent to smell like? Well, I know that I want it to be delicately musky. I want it to be definitely woody, sandalwood, particularly sandalwood. I do want a slightly ambroxan feel, and I do want accents of sweetness. So, but then I ask myself, well, what are the more important notes? Well, definitely I want the musky pillowiness. Definitely want that sandalwood. Definitely want that subtle sweetness. So in my mind, I'm immediately grabbing all, through my materials, and this is where you start testing. Well, if you want musky, what kind of musk do you want? Do you want a clean linen musk? Do you want a soft, bright textured musk? Do you want, a fruity nuanced musk? Do you want a deep, heavy animalic musk? And this is where you start to play with. So in this style of perfume, I know I wanted something cleaner, something a little bit more on the smooth and mellow side, not a clean linen musk, but something that has enough texture and pillowiness, but still clean and smooth. So I reached for some musks. I know I'm going to use Edenolide, and I'm going to mix it with Celestialide. Now, in this part of the phase, you'll be trying as many different musks as you think you'll want to try. But those are the two that I gravitated towards. So that covers my muskiness. And I said, well, I definitely wanted to do something sandalwood. Now you can reach for a sandalwood base. You can make up your own sandalwood accords using like Bactinol, Javanol, Pliosantol, all those things. And this is where you start grabbing all your sandalwood materials or just a single base. In my case, I'm using Firmenich's Dreamwood base to cover all my sandalwood needs. And then I said I definitely wanted some sort of an ambroxan dry down feel. So obviously I've got my ambroxan. And I said I wanted a subtle sweetness. And when I think of sweetness, you have to ask, well, what kind of sweet? Do you want candy sweet like ethyl maltol? Do you want vanillic sweet? Do you want gourmand sweet? And in this perfume style, I kind of wanted a little bit of aspects of everything. But since you're only building on what you want the customer, the end user's nose to hit dominantly is the one you're going to reach for. So I know of the sweetness in the dry down, I want it to be dominantly honey. So I would reach for something like Firmenich's Honey Signature. Now I've got here, some vanillin, I've got ethyl maltol, ethyl vanillin, I've got all these different sweet things, but like for this starting point, you're working on what you want the end consumer's nose to identify with easily. You can dress it up with other accents later, which we'll discuss. So that's pretty much it for my base. I mean, it's a simple base. A musk blend, my Dreamwood base for my sandalwood, a little bit of ambroxan, and some Honey Signature for honey sweetness. It doesn't get any more simpler than that. But again, there's going to be more materials you're going to add to this later, but since this is the basis of what I want the end consumer's nose to identify with the most in the very dry down stages, this is what I'm only going to work on first. I'm only going to blend these first. So you've got your materials, you've got your empty beaker, you're going to want to grab plenty of pipettes, and at this point, since we're not using a scale just yet, you're going to do the old, the old John Carl's method where you're going to write down number of drops and your material. And you'll do this with multiple beakers. So the first one, you're going to, write down all your materials, and you're going to say, well, let's try these must blends. I'm going to do, 2 drops of this one, 2 drops of that one. Write it down. Now let's add in a little bit of Dreamwood base. We'll start off with just 1 drop and see what that's like. Take your ambroxan. Let's start with 1 drop, see what that's like. Honey Signature, we'll see what happens with 1 drop. Write all these amounts down, swirl it up. You're not going to be left with a lot again, so that's only like maybe 6, 7, or 8 drops you're adding in. Swirl it around. You're left with a little bit right here. Take your pinky, dip it in, slap it on your skin. Now, disclaimer, don't do what I just told you to do if you're using your materials raw or neat. This method really is for the person that likes to have all their materials pre-diluted down to an ethyl alcohol or DPG for easier, dosings and stuff like that. So if your materials are pre-diluted, yes, go ahead, dip your finger in, slap it on there. Don't use it all up. You're gonna want to use this later to compare with. Give it a smell. You'll notice right away, you'll smell it, you'll be like, well, I'm getting dominantly this note or maybe too much of this note. So then your next beaker, you're going to do the same materials again, but whatever you thought was a little too strong, dial it back. You may want to take the other materials and increase that amount so you can dial back on the one that you found that was too strong. So again, you make another trial batch, different amounts. Swirl, 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 a different finger, different part of your arm, smell it. And you're literally going to be doing this. How many times it takes you? It could take you maybe only 2 or 3 times till you find a right balance that you're happy with. It could take you 10 times. But keep going until you find what I call a marriage. And to me, a marriage is when everything is blended cohesively. So not necessarily so it smells like it's one unified smell, but you want to get it as close as possible to what you envisioned in your mind, how you wanted it to smell in the very latest stages of the dry down. So once you get through all that, and again, you'll still have all your beakers with all your different trials of this, and you can sit here and smell them all, but smell them on your skin. Find the one that works the best. And then once you find the one that works the best, you're going to circle it and maybe put a star next to it and be like, that's the best one. So you'll put those materials away and you'll be like, awesome, I found, let me just put these all back. Be like, awesome, I found the perfect marriage of notes for my latest dry down stages. So that part is covered. Now there again, later down the road, you're gonna be adding some more materials that fit in that criteria of the later stages of the dry down, but those are going to be accent scents, and we'll explain more later. So now that you've got that covered, you're going to move up now to the mid notes, and you're going to say to yourself, okay, so the middle note is the heart of the fragrance. This is pretty much the bulk of what this fragrance's theme is going to revolve around. So in the case of this one, like I said, it's a women's fruity floral, more floral than fruity. The fruity is an accent, so we're not going to work on that just yet. We're going to work on just the floral aspects, or some of the notes that, again, you want the consumer's nose to identify with first. Don't touch any of the accents just yet. Don't start reaching for your Hedione. Don't start reaching for your Isoe Super or all these like blenders and modifiers. Work on the core materials first. So I know I wanted, a lily of the valley, like a clean lily muguet note. I definitely wanted some iris. I definitely wanted, what did I say? Peony. I wanted some of that. And I wanted some green tea. So of course, those are the notes that I want the consumer to identify with easily in the perfume. They don't have to dig in and fish around for subtle things. When they smell it, they should be easily identify, yes, I smell this clean lily kind of thing going on. I definitely smell this powdery iris. I'm getting this rosy kind of peony vibe with a little, green tea kind of wash behind it. So it's like, cool. You can add in more stuff to it later to tweak and accent things, but we're going to work on that now. So again, you're going to grab your materials, and so in the case of Lily of the Valley, lilies, muguet, there's so many materials out there. You've got your like for example, lily floor. What else do we've got? Liliol, Lyrol, Florhydral, Aquaflora. I mean, you name it, it's out there. So you pull them out, you start smelling things, be like, what do I, what's going to fit this perfume theme the best as far as what I'm trying to portray to the consumer. In my case, I'm going with Lily Floor because it was more of the delicate, substantial lily muguet notes. I'm going to definitely cover it up a little bit with some Mayol, which is a not as strong muguet kind of material, because Lily Floor is really strong. For anyone that's used it, it's really strong. A little bit goes a long way, but I still want to carry that scent with an aura of lily around it. But it is going to be it's part of the note that I want to push forward. So I'm going to go with Lily 4, backed with a little bit of Mayol. I wanted some iris. So I have a pre-made iris accord that I've made myself here with a little bit of Oris Jivco, which is just a Oris Roots Absolute Replacer. I wanted some peony, so I'll grab some peony materials like Peomosa, I think is made by IFF. You could even grab a little bit of rosy materials because peony and rose go hand in hand. And then I wanted some green tea kind of surrounding it all. So, I've got green tea SFE base by Firmenich. And again, it's very few materials. So I'll just grab these here. And there's one over here. It's like 5 to 6 materials. But this is where you're taking just these 5 to 6 materials and you make another section called mids. And you're going to write down the materials and how many drops of each. You have to experiment to see what works best. And you'll find that the stronger materials, obviously, you're going to use a lot less. The lighter, more aromatic materials, you're going to use probably a lot more. let me just put these back before I lose where they went. And again, you'll have multiple beakers and you're just working on just the mids, just the ones that you want to be identifiable in the perfume. And you just, one beaker, boom, 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 put in your materials. This is test number 1. Let's see how it smells. Swish, swish, swish. Take a finger, probably do it on a different hand, different arm. Smell it. And when you're smelling it, don't just smell it and walk and just be like, oh, that sucks. Smell it, let it sit for a good hour. Let it dry in a little bit so you can actually feel how the stages envelop and develop and kind of like dry out within that hour. So don't just put it on, smell it and be like, yeah, that sucks, and just start working on the next batch. Smell it, let it waft, take a walk around, go outside, smell it out in some fresh air. Definitely get out of this room where you've got all these materials and chemicals wafting all about, in the room. So smell it, get a good idea of what it's like, make a mental note and be like, okay, I'm smelling too much of this, so I'm probably going to want to take that down a notch. I'm really not picking up any hints of this material, so let me try and amp that up a bit. And then grab another empty beaker, work on your next test batch. Just the middle notes, just the ones you want to be the star players of the theme. And again, drop, 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 mix, mix, finger, swipe, smell, and let that batch sit around for an hour, because now you've got 2 different scents on you and you can kind of A/B them and see where the direction is heading. You may go back to an older test and be like, you know what? I thought this one sucked, but as I kept making different batches, this one was the best batch of them all that seemed to be the most cohesive, or at least it kind of portrayed that vibe that I'm trying to put off in this style of perfume. So again, you would then circle the winner of that. So now you have, at this point, probably 5 to 10 different trials combined when you consider the base trials that you did, the mid trials that you did, and you're not even halfway there yet. So you can already see why this may seem long, frustrating, and daunting, but you're learning things along the way. You're learning not only your materials, every material is going to react differently on a perfume by perfume basis. So what you add as a dosage for, this material here, and you say, this one worked perfect with this amount of dosage, you try that same amount in the next perfume that's a completely different style, it may not even work. And you're probably going to go through this all over again. But don't let it get discouraged, because this is normal. Going through multiple trial after trial after trial and going through many batches is absolutely normal. A lot of people have this notion to think that these, master perfumers can just grab materials, just go boom, 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 done, finished, it's perfect. That's never the case. They go through the same process as we do. They go through many, many trials trying to perfect it, trying to do different things, trying to get the balances and how they envisioned it in their mind and how they want it to smell when the end consumer, that perfume hits their nose. That's what they want them to smell. So don't think this is absolutely crazy, because it's not. So now, let me get back on track. So now you've got notes on your best smelling base, just the key materials. Your best smelling mids, again, just the key materials. Now at this point, you're going to take a fresh new beaker. You're going to go to your base, your notes here, and be like, okay, I had this many drops of this, and you're going to recreate your base. In that same beaker, you are also going to add in and recreate your mids based on the number of drops that you had noted here. You're going to go through that process and see how the base and the mids connect. You'll add them, swish, swish, swish. At this point, if you have any room on your arms left, maybe not, dip a blotter scent strip in it or something. And you'll swish it around, dip, or if you've got room on your arm, just put it somewhere up here, put it maybe on over here on the back of your hand. I've seen some people put it on their ankles and their legs and they're smelling it. That's crazy, but you know what, whatever works. And at that point, you're going to now start to smell what the base and what the mids would smell like together based on your two separate trials of this separate base and separate mids. And you may love it, you may hate it, but now it's going to give you an idea of what those two smell like. And at that point, you can either A, start to adjust that portion of the formula, meaning when your base and mids are combined, you have to keep in mind you have not added any top notes yet. So don't think to yourself at this point, oh, it's not bright enough, it's not lively enough. You haven't added any liveliness yet. You haven't added any Hedione, Izui Super, your Delphol HC. You haven't added any aldehydes. You haven't added any ozonic materials. There's no calone, there's no helianol, there's none of that stuff in yet. You're not touching that yet until your core is solidified first. You'll dress it up with all these nice little pretty smells around it later. But if the core don't work, it doesn't matter how much of these nice little accents you add. If the core sucks, it's gonna suck regardless of how much you try to dress it up. It's kind of like, there's a saying, you can't polish a turd. Meaning it's still a piece of shit no matter how much you try to clean it up and make it look pretty. So get the core working first. So hopefully at this point, let's say you've added your core base materials, your core mid materials, and you're digging it. You're like, you know what? I'm smelling that great, mid, floralness that I intended, that I want, and it dries right down to that nice delicate musk, into this little subtle sandalwood with a hint of sweetness, or whatever you're trying to concoct. And you're like, I like it, I dig it. Perfect. Let's move on to the next step. Now it's time to start dressing it up. And I'm going to say leave the top notes for last, because top notes are the most volatile, the most quickly fleeting, evaporating. And when somebody sprays a finished perfume, it's the top notes that usually last 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes if you're lucky. And then it's gone, and it immediately goes into the heart for the next few hours. So that's why it's important to get the heart and the base working first before you even consider top notes. Top notes to me is just it's icing on the cake, basically. So now at this point, you've got your beaker, you smell your base and your mids, units together, and they smell great. Now, of course, you've probably already dipped your finger in it, or you've dipped a blotter, so your ratios may be a little off. So get rid of that beaker, grab a new one, recreate that same thing again. The core base materials first, core mid materials second. Now you can start dressing it up, and you can attack this in different ways. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want to attack first? Do I want to attack, I said I wanted some fruitiness in this, and I wanted more sweetness. Maybe I want some ozonic in this. Maybe I want this. Maybe I want greenness. Maybe I want that. Attack those in stages. So you've recreated, once again, your core base, your core mids. Now you have to ask yourself, what do I want to attack first? Well, I want to know what it smells like if I add some Hedione, if I add some Timber Silk, or maybe Izui Super or whatever. And I want to know what that smells like when I add that, because a lot of popular perfumes have that in decent amounts. So I want to know what that's going to smell like when I add it to this. So you've got your base and mids pre-mixed in there, ready to go for the next thing. Grab your Izui Super or Timber Silk or Sylvamber, whatever kind of faint woody material that you have. Grab your Hedione or Hedione HC, Curacimol Super, whatever it's called. There's so many names for it. Grab just those two materials now. You're only going to work on those materials because now you need to test how much do you add of each. What happens to this portion of a perfume when I add X amount of this, X amount of that. And again, you're going to grab more empty beakers and you're going to line them up and you're going to say, in this one, I am going to, in this perfume base that I have sitting here that has the base and the mids, I'm going to add just 2 drops of Isoi Super, just 2 drops of Hedione. So it's equal amounts of Hedione, equal amounts of Isoi Super, swish, swish, swish. Recreate your base and mids yet again, all those core materials in another separate beaker. Try another batch. Let me see what it smells like with 3 drops of Hedione and only 1 drop of Isoi Super. Boom, boom, boom. Swish, swish, swish. Line up another beaker. Let me see what happens when I have more of Isoi Super and less of Hedione. Let me see what that smells like. Swish, swish, swish. Now you've got all these different trials and you're smelling. You're dipping blotters in them. You're smelling. Seeing what the effects of just adding those 2 materials in different varying amounts. Either a lot of this, little of this, equal amounts, vice versa. To give you an idea. And then make a note on your thing, on your scratch pad, the one that you think smells the best. So now you've got that, you put a star next to it, you circle it. That trial is done. Now what do you do next? Well, you tackle the next accent piece. You can see how daunting this is already, but trust me, the more you acquaint yourself with trying it this way, by the time you get to your end perfume, there is less errors to be found because you've tackled it in chunks along the way and you've monitored along the way and you know what you're doing along the way, instead of just dumping a shit ton of materials into one beaker and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. If you tackle it in chunks, you're less prone for errors. So again, grab another empty beaker, recreate your core base materials, recreate your core mids, pick the winning ratio of Isoi Super and Hedione that you found was best, mix it up. Now you're going to say, what do I want to tackle next? I wanted some fruity sweetness. What kind of fruits do I want? I don't know. Maybe I want peach. Maybe I want strawberry. Maybe I want guava. Maybe I want this. Maybe I want that. But at this point in your mind, you should already know what kind of fruitiness you want to have in this perfume. In my case, it was a women's perfume for spring. I wanted something peachy, something lactonic and peachy. What do? Grab my peach materials. I've got my Robertet peach. I've got Nectaril. I've got another peachy material over there. And then just start playing with it and just add it in. Again, at this point, you're doing accent pieces. Don't just start throwing a shit ton in there. Do 1 to 2 drops. See what just 1 to 2 drops does to that blend. And then you're going to grab another beaker. Recreate your blend again. Do 3 to 4 drops. See what that does. Was it too much? Sniff, compare, dip, put them on your skin, smell, compare. See what works best and see what smells cohesive. And essentially, I could sit here and talk for over an hour on this method, but I think at this point, you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to put out, what I'm trying to kind of, not necessarily advise, but this kind of theory, this method that I've kind of been gravitating towards as of recently. Because now you're just working in chunks at this point, and if you've gone this far in the video and you've seen where we're at, now you're just working on minor accent pieces, and these are the very small amounts. You're not adding in too much. You're barely adding anything at all, because if you add too much peach or if you add too much of an accent piece, you're going to tip the scale and ruin that nice balanced, base mid marriage that you work so hard at. So that's why it's important when you're working on accent pieces. And again, accent pieces are subtle hints of certain, nuances that most people might not pick up unless they were told. So in the case of this fragrance, if somebody smelled it, they would be like, yeah, this is a great, floral, I'm getting these woods and I'm getting something fruity. I don't really know what kind of fruity, but it smells kind of fruity sweet. But then if I tell them, yeah, there's a little peach in there, they'll be like, Yeah, you're right, there is peach in there. That peach is a subtle nuance. And that's the subtle nuances you're now going to slowly add in very small amounts, small enough not to disrupt the balance that you created. And then once you've added that nuance, you work on the next nuance. What if you wanted something green? Grab your green materials, grab your cis-3-hexanol, your stemone, your liferome, your, all these green materials, and just start playing with them in very small amounts. You'll find that sometimes if even the single slightest drop of one material overpowers the blend, well, you know what you have to do at that point. You either have to pre-dilute that single material down further so it's a weaker solution, or you literally have to double the trial size of your base and blend. And you just work on it and tackle it in stages. And then eventually you will get to just the top, the top notes. And at that point you're like, all right, it's just time to work on the icing of the cake. What do I want the end user to smell the minute that atomizer hits their skin, and they're like, the first couple seconds, what's the first thing I want them to get hit with? Whether if it's bergamot, grapefruit, oranges, maybe some sweet apple, neroli. I mean, all these different volatile top notes, anything that I consider that's like maybe 50 hours on a paper strip or less is to me a very fleeting top notes. And those are the icing on the cake that you would add at the very last stages. And at that point, it's going to be pretty easy now, because you've worked so hard working on your core base, core mids. You've added in your accents in small amounts. You didn't disrupt the balance. Everything smells great. Now it's just icing on the cake. And what I find with top notes is you can be a little bit more forgiving on the top notes. And it's kind of hard to break the perfume if you screw up a top note and add too much of, oops, I've added too much of bergamot. It doesn't matter, because bergamot's going to be gone in 15 to 20 minutes on your skin anyway. So once it's gone, it's gone. Obviously, you would still want to fix it, but don't get butthurt about it. So now, that's the beauty of it, is now that you've finished a completed perfume from base, mids, to top, your accent pieces, your core pieces, everything smells great. You're going to make another, finished trial with everything in it. The entire kitchen sink's in there basically. And swish, swish, swish. You're not at this point, you're not going to dip your finger in it and go like this. You're done with your trial, your major finished trial batch perfume number 1. And at that point, let me just go up here. You'll grab yourself an atomizer spray. And you can get, a 50 pack of these for like $10 on Amazon, these little 5 ml sprayers. Take what you got, fill it up, swirl it around a little bit. And of course, you're excited at this point. You're super excited. You're like, I need to know what it smells like. It's finally finished. I need to, smell it. Go ahead, if you can't wait, spray it and test it on your skin, get an idea of what it smells like, but don't do any critical evaluations of that scent yet. And the main reason for that is you want 24 to 48 hours to let all these materials that you've just added together to kind of sit and kind of, blend in with each other. Right now, when they're freshly mixed, everything's just kind of dancing around. All the molecules are dancing around. They're bouncing off each other. And over 24 to 48 hours, things start to mellow down. And then, after the 48-hour mark, things are starting to blend together. And that's when you'll notice, after 2 days of letting it sit, you'll spray it again, and it smells more unified and more cohesive. If you sprayed this immediately after you blended it, you just blended it 5 minutes ago, you poured it, and you're like, I can't wait, I need to know. By all means, spray it. But don't do any critical evaluation or thinking of any changes in your mind yet. Just get an idea, spray it, and be like, okay, I'll make a mental note. This note is kind of sticking out a little bit. Maybe I might want to tweak this. Maybe you want to amplify this one small little section here. But just bury those thoughts in the back of your mind. let that sit for 48 hours, because I can guarantee you 2 days from now, you'll spray this again. You'll smell it and be like, huh, okay, that part that I thought was a little too loud actually isn't quite so loud anymore. And that one part that I thought I couldn't really detect, I'm starting to detect it. And that's when the waiting of that 48-hour period settles in, and things are kind of slowly unifying. And that's what you want. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. That will be your first finished perfume trial number 1. Expect to make finished perfume trial number 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 20, 30, 40 until you are satisfied. Don't stop until you're satisfied. By all means, your first blend may smell good, but why not perfect it? As a DIYer, even a professional perfumer, we want perfection. We want, when somebody smells this perfume, you want them to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Don't give them something half-assed. Keep blending, make another version of a perfume and be like, let me test it and amplify the honey. Even though I think it's perfectly blended, the way that this is, let me make one more version where I amplify the honey, just the honey, and see what happens. Make another trial version number 3 and be like, you know what? I'm going to take my lily floor, even though it smells great in here, I can smell it, I can detect it. I want to see what happens if I take the lily floor and just amp it up a bit. Let me overdose it just a touch and see what happens. Trial number 4. You know what? I am gonna overdose the living crap out of this with lemon oil and just see what happens. Try it. And at that point, you'll have all these iterations of all these finished perfume trials, number 1, number 2, number 3, and you'll have notes of what you've done to, the changes that you've done. So when you smell, let me go back and smell number 17 and compare it to number 6. Be like, I'm liking number 17 more, but there's a nice sweet dry down in number 6 that I'm liking. You'll go through your notes and you'll find out what it was in number 6, why that was such a sweet dry down, or why this one was preferred. So one last thing, I forgot to mention this, is when you're now ready to make the full perfume, you're done making your core base only, you're done making your core mids, you've done all the accent pieces, you've done your top, and you're happy with it, you're going to make another version. And at this point, you're going to take your notebook and you're going to throw it away. Well, not throw it away in the trash, but get rid of it. Because now you're going to want to look at it and see what you did. Now you're going to turn on your scale and you're going to start to recreate what you did, but measure your drops, measure it in weight, measure it in grams. And that's what you're going to start using as your baseline. Because now you'll have your perfume formula. I've got, instead of looking at mile on my notes, I don't want it to say mile, I've got 3 drops. You want to look at a formula and say mile, I've got 0.045 grams in this trial. I've got 0.9 grams of this iris accord in this trial. You want to see actual concrete numbers, not drops, because drops can vary. People don't realize different manufacturers of pipettes vary by drops. I've got 2 different styles of pipettes here, where the nose is a slim nose, this is a wide nose. If I take this and I take a drop of this, measure it, it might be 0.017 grams. If I take this one that's a needle nose, 1 drop might be 0.015. To you, you're probably like thinking, well, that's not really much of a difference. Who gives a rat's ass? It makes a difference, especially when you start to work in larger scales or even in smaller scale batches. It makes a difference. Those fractions of a percent make a difference depending on what the material is. So I've rambled on way too much as always, but hopefully this will kind of give you guys an idea of maybe trying this method the next time you tackle a brand new perfume, or if you're having trouble with the current formulation of a perfume that you're currently working on and you just don't know what went wrong, or you smell something that's just not quite right but you don't know where to start, tackle it in sections. Work on the core base first, work on the core mids, add your accents, and slowly build it up and keep smelling it until you find the offending smell, essentially. So yeah, that's it. I should probably start calling this feature the Ramble On feature because I just talk too damn much. Without further ado, I'm retarded. With that being said, until next time.